Okay, let's see. Okay, let's begin. Sorry for running a little bit behind. Just had to make sure everything was showing properly. So welcome to week 4 of the Dallas County Voter Education webinar series. This is a 7-week series in which we will go over various topics. This week topic is going to be discussing voters with special needs. So specifically voters with disabilities. Let's see. Okay, let's begin. Sorry for running a little bit behind. There we go. I was hearing myself echo, so I had to kind of correct that. Excuse me for the delay. Okay, so first things first, I really would like to start off by addressing what it is as an election department we do here, because that really revolves around how we are able to assist voters with special needs. Our mission here, one of them is making sure that elections are fair, accessible, secure, and transparent. So the key word there is being accessible. We want to ensure that everyone who wishes to exercise their right to vote is eligible, or it's able to vote with no interference. They have a seamless voting experience just as anyone else would. So that is one of the things that we do here at the elections department. Now, voters with special needs, there are a few different options in which you can exercise your right to vote. The first things first is making sure that you're actually registered to vote. The upcoming voter registration deadline is October 7th for this November 5th general and joint election. So it's definitely important to make sure that you're registered ahead of that deadline to ensure that you're able to exercise your right to vote. Now, I won't go into how to register or where to register. That was a topic we covered a few weeks back, actually the first week of the series. But we do have information available on our website specifically dedicated to how and where to register. But the most important takeaway in terms of registration is just making sure you're registered ahead of that October 7th, 2024 voter registration deadline for this upcoming November election. Now, other than making sure you're registered to vote, or when you confirm you're registered to vote, there are a few different ways in which you can actually exercise your right to vote if you are a voter with special needs or a disability in particular. So one of those ways is by voting by mail through the early voting period, which involves applying for a mail ballot, or which involves completing a mail ballot application. Submitting that application to us, and then upon receipt and upon approval, you will then receive a mail ballot package. That is another webinar we covered a few weeks ago as well, where we walk through the entire process on how to complete and submit a mail ballot application, as well as how to complete your mail ballot package and return it to us by the deadline. For voters with special needs, the most important thing is just determining if you're actually eligible to vote by mail, should this be an option which you would like to practice or to exercise. So let's see. Here we go. Now, the qualifications in order to vote by mail, you have to meet any of these requirements. One will be either 65 or older on election day. You either have to have a disability or expected to give birth within 3 weeks before or after election day. You could be expected to be absent from the county during the early voting period, which runs from October 21st through November 2nd, and on election day, which is November 5th. And then if you're confined to jail, but otherwise eligible, you qualify to vote by mail. Now, the two takeaways here, because we are discussing voters with special needs, one of the qualifications is having a disability. So Texas Election Code defines a disability to include a sickness or physical condition that prevents a voter from appearing at the polling place on election day without a likelihood of needing personal assistance or of injuring the voter's health. So if that pertains to you, then you are eligible to vote by mail. When completing your application, something to call out here, if you are a voter with a special need or with a disability, you do have access or you do have the right to utilize an assistant or a witness when completing your application. And I'll clarify the difference between the two. An assistant is going to be anyone who helps you complete or return the application, whereas a witness is going to be anyone who signs on your behalf. So anyone who, if you're a voter who is unable to actually indicate a mark or provide your signature on the ballot by mail application, then you can utilize a witness to sign the application, of course, in your presence, in order to ensure that your application is eligible to be returned to us and processed accordingly. Now, an assistant, again, is just someone who is going to assist you with completing the application and working through the application, assisting you with, making sure everything is accounted for and completed according to the requirements of the application. An assistant can also be anyone who is able to drop off the application at the local post office for you or send it through a carrier or whatever method you choose to send it. Something to note here is that an assistant or a witness cannot deliver your application to us in person. As the applicant, you do have to be the one to deliver it in person to us if this is a method in which you choose to vote. So that's an important takeaway there. Let's see, now, am I missing anything so far? We covered assistance, we covered witness. Upon receiving your application for ballot by mail, what we will do, we'll process it here within the elections department. And then upon approval, we'll send you out a ballot by mail package. Unfortunately, on our website, we now have a feature where you could actually track that ballot by mail package through our voter lookup tool or our mail ballot tracker tool. So that is something that you could kind of keep up with, as well as tracking your application status. That is something that's available, and I'll drop it in the chat. Upon receiving your mail ballot package, you can have someone assist you with completing it. They just will need to, make sure that they're certifying that they were there to assist you. And that same thing applies for the application as well. There are sections where your assistant or your witness will list that they're assisting you, and then it will list their relationship to you. Now, anytime we're talking about completing an application on your behalf or returning a ballot on your behalf, you do need to be, of course, in the presence of whoever is assisting or witnessing you complete this process, because at the end of the day, it is your application and it is your ballot that is going to be returned. So you do need to be in the presence of your assistant or your witness as this process is going on. I've had that question before, so I just want to clarify. You do have to be present. Now, outside of voting by mail, and I'll actually reiterate here, in order to participate or to receive a ballot by mail, we do need to receive your application by October 25th. So you do have some time, but I will advise you not to wait until the last day to submit your application, because of course, October 25th, that's only a few weeks away from actual election day. So the later that you wait to submit your application to us, the more pressure you're putting on yourself to actually return and ensure that your mail ballot reaches us upon completion. Now, in addition to voting by mail, as a voter with a special need or a disability, of course, you have access to also vote in person as well. So on election day, we will have over 440 vote centers, and during early voting, we will have 70 vote centers in which you could access either one of those locations that are most conveniently located near you and exercise your right to vote. Now, when you're in a vote center, the same thing that applies with completing a mail ballot application will also kind of apply within the vote center. And I mean that in terms of receiving assistance. At the vote center, you won't have a witness per se, but you can have an interpreter if that is a service that you need. So if you are a voter with a special need or have a disability, then you are able to receive assistance or even have an interpreter assist you when you're visiting the vote center. Now, really the most important thing that we take into account when visiting a vote center is ensuring that you come prepared. That's going to make sure that your process is as seamless as possible. So one of the ways to do that is ensuring that you have an acceptable form of ID. So the most popular or the most not useful, but the most popular form of ID will be your driver's license, your Texas driver's license. That form of ID is actually one that could be scanned at the check-in table to pull up your information within our voter registration database. So that is always encouraged that you make sure that you have a form of ID, of course. If you do not have a valid form of ID, so I'll go over what the valid forms of IDs are in just a moment here, then you can utilize an alternative form of ID, which I'll go into as well. But of course, first step is making sure that you provide a valid form of ID. So one of those, as I mentioned, is a Texas driver's license. You could provide that as your valid form of ID. You could also ensure that you provide either a passport, whether it's the book or a card. You could do a military ID, a personal identification card, or a Texas election card. I think, am I missing anything else? I think that's it. And then in terms of alternative IDs, let me pull that list up really quickly here just to make sure I'm not missing anything. You could submit a utility bill. Here we go. You could submit a utility bill, whether it's current or whether it's the original or a copy of it. You could submit your birth certificate, whether it's the copy or the original. You could submit a bank statement, a government check, an original paycheck, or a government document. So all of those items or those IDs are considered List B. And something to take into account when providing a List B document is that you will have to complete a reasonable impediment declaration, which is basically you certifying that you don't have access to obtain any of the List A IDs. And it's just stating that you can't present one of those alternate forms that are a part of the List A. Now, upon entering the vote center when you're voting in person, there are some things to take into account. You are able to bring your sample ballot with you, which is something that is accessible on our website at dallascountyvotes.org. You could utilize our voter lookup tool. It'll pull up your personalized sample ballot. That sample ballot can be printed. You could mark it up, and then you could take it into a vote center to actually reference as you're at the voting machine, selecting your, why can't I think of the word? So making your selections is what I'm trying to say. I apologize. So that is something that you could definitely utilize. And the reason why you would want to reference that sample ballot or bring in a sample ballot or even just any written piece of paper, a note to yourself or whatever the case may be, is because you cannot actually have electronic devices. So a lot of people like to put their notes into their phone, of course, but at the voting machine, you cannot actually have your electronic device, or at the vote center in general, your electronic device like a phone or a tablet cannot actually be out and present. Something else to consider is that electioneering and campaigning is not allowed within 100 feet of the vote center. So any gear or where you're advocating for your candidate or campaigning for your candidate, that is actually prohibited within the vote center. So that's something to keep in mind. Now, something that I do want to speak about, of course, especially during this particular week, is poll watchers. So earlier when I was discussing entering a vote center as a person who may require assistance, you are able to bring an assistant or even an interpreter of your choice, whether that's a close family member, a relative, a close friend, whatever the case may be. You are able to bring in an assistant or interpreter of your choice. Now, if you bring in an assistant or interpreter of your choice, then that assistant or interpreter will have to complete an oath, and then they could assist you with, navigating to the voting machine and even assist you with marking your selections as you instruct them to. Now, at a vote center, or at your vote center, or any vote center really, you can observe the presence of a poll watcher. A poll watcher is someone who's appointed either by the political party, the candidate, even the state, who is there really just to observe the conduct of the vote center and ensure that everything is a-okay, right? Making sure that we're checking all the boxes, just overall making sure the conduct of the vote center is acceptable. So a poll watcher, if you're going to use an assistant or an interpreter to accompany you to the voting machine, a poll watcher does not have that right to observe your interaction with the person of your choice at that voting machine. They have to stay within a reasonable distance from you, of course, while you're voting, because your vote is sacred and it is private. But if you are going to enter the vote center and you do not have an assistant or an interpreter there to accompany you at the voting machine, and you do decide that you need some assistance at the voting machine to mark your selections or just to assist you with navigating that voting machine, and you choose to use someone who is employed by that vote center, so a judge or a poll worker, anyone who is there working the vote center, that poll watcher will then have access to observe your interaction between that employee and yourself, just to ensure that that employee or the clerk or judge of that vote center is adhering to your instructions. So that is something to take into account. And that's a big one that kind of comes into question for the most part. Let's see, something else to consider is if you enter a vote center and, for example, there's a long line and your health is essentially at risk if you're going to wait in this long line. As a voter with a special need or with a disability, you do have the right to have priority in that line. So you would essentially just advise the judge of that vote center that you have a disability, or that you just you need to work your way through that line pretty quickly in regards to your health, and that is something that you have the right to do. Now, while I'm speaking of being at the voting machine, I think it's important to call out exactly how the voting machine helps individuals who have a disability or have special needs navigate and make their selections confidently and easily. So we do use voting machines that have the capability to enlarge the text size. So if you have trouble reading, like myself, smaller text, then you can enlarge the text on your voting machine. And then the voting machine also allows contrast. So if it's easier for you to read in Black and white text, the voting machine does give you access to that. Another thing that the voting machine has, it supports English, Spanish, and Vietnamese. So that is a capability that it has. And then most importantly, for members or for individuals with disabilities, it does have a keypad, which makes navigating the voting machine more easier for certain individuals. So the keypad, it's going to enable you to navigate using arrows and different buttons. Underneath those buttons or on those buttons, there's Braille as well for individuals who are blind, who want to utilize the Braille to navigate. And then it also has the capability underneath the voting machine to plug in your earphones in order to hear audio. That audio is available again in Spanish, English, and Vietnamese as well. So there's a few capabilities there to help members of the blind community or the hard of hearing community to ensure that you are able to make your selections or mark your selections confidently and securely. Now, if you are a voter with a special need. An alternative to entering a vote center is actually outside of, voting by mail is actually, you could do curbside voting. Now, curbside voting is essentially when you pull into a vote center, there's going to be a dedicated space that's available for you to basically park yourself or station yourself. There's going to be a sign that advises you to call a number. This number that you're going to call is going to contact the judge of that vote center. That judge is then going to be aware that you're, waiting for assistance in the curbside or the designated curbside voting area. And then they themselves or their clerks will then come out to assist you with voting in the comfort of your car. So everything will remain the same if you're receiving assistance or if you need assistance while voting in the car, then the whole process will remain the same. It's the same equipment that's being used. The equipment is just really coming out to you versus you going into the voting, to the vote center to mark your selections and cast your vote. Now, when it comes to actually casting your vote, what will happen after you mark your selections and your ballot dispenses, then you will just simply place the ballot into a secrecy envelope. The clerks will then enter the vote center and deposit your ballot into the tabulator. Either the judge will deposit the ballot or two clerks will deposit the ballot into the tabulator to ensure that your vote is casted. And then you'll receive an I voted sticker, just as you would if you actually entered the vote center. Now, curbside voting, it is available at all of our vote centers. It's available during early voting and election day. So if this is a method of voting that you would prefer to use, maybe you can get to the vote center. It's just more difficult to actually enter the vote center and access the vote center, then that is something that is available. Now, something that I kind of want to back up on is interpretation, because I know I was really more so addressing receiving assistance in terms of receiving assistance for your mail ballot application or even assistance when voting in person or even voting in person using the curbside method. But I do want to clarify receiving assistance in terms of an interpreter. So for members of the deaf or hard of hearing community, or just members or individuals who speak different languages, whether it's Vietnamese, Spanish, or any other language, we do utilize an interpreter service. It's available on the iPads actually that are provided to, not the iPads, I'm sorry, the phones that are provided to the judges, where if we do not have someone present who is able to communicate with you in your preferred language, or if you have not bought someone to accompany you to translate, then you have access to this interpretation service in which the service connects our judges and our poll workers with a live interpreter, and then they're able to help you communicate that way. So that is a service that is available at all of our vote centers, both during early voting and election day, that I want to make sure that you are aware of. Now, I think that's really all in terms of voters with special needs or voters with disabilities. I want to make sure that I covered everything. I believe we covered who qualifies for assistance, voting assistance at the vote center. We made sure to cover that our voting machines are acceptable. We covered curbside. We've covered voting by mail. We didn't really cover how to request assistance, but I could clarify that. And then we covered your rights as a voter with a disability or with special needs. And then, a good one to cover is reporting accessibility issues. So I'll go back and cover these two, how to request assistance and reporting accessibility issues. So if you are a member with or individual with a special need or a disability, you could always contact our office here at Dallas County Elections just to advise us that, you're going to a vote center, you have a special need or you need assistance, and make us aware of your arrival if you need to, just so that we're prepared and we could alert the election workers at that vote center that you're planning on attending to be prepared to assist you. We could definitely help facilitate that as well. And if you do find yourself needing assistance within the vote center upon your arrival, whether you're at the check-in process, you're just simply giving over your ID, or you're at the voting machine, you could always notify a clerk or a judge at that vote center, that you're needing assistance. Whoever is present around you at that vote center and they're actually working the vote center, they should be able to guide you to whatever type of assistance that you need. In addition to contacting us, if you are ever experiencing any difficulty while voting at a vote center, there are a few additional numbers in which you could contact, one of them being Secretary of State's, Disability Rights Texas, and then the Coalition of Texans with Disabilities. And I'll make sure to drop those numbers in the chat here once we wrap up. But if you are ever experiencing any trouble while voting, and you are a member, or if you are an individual with a special need or a disability, then you always could reach out to us so we could try to negate that situation or assist to the best of our capabilities, of course, work out a solution there, as well as the additional numbers that I mentioned. So I'll drop those in the chat here. But other than that, I think we've covered everything that we possibly can. I don't think I have any questions in the chat. If I missed anything, I'll make sure to double back and address your questions as needed. But until next time, I'll see you guys for week 5.